As soon as you finish that sentence, it was just like Nate frozen on the screen.
Classic.
Well, yeah, so you have to repeat what you said.
All right, perfect. No,
No better way to start.
just like Web3, you're currently working in the Web3 space. Like,
Mm,
can you tell me or just explain? Because I still don't really understand exactly what Web3 is. Like, you hear it all the time, but like,
yeah.
what is that?
What is Web3? There's probably going to be a different answer depending on who you chat to. I'm probably better off talking to it from like a technical perspective. Like Web3, when I hear the word Web3, I think about like cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and specifically being able to send and receive money, like magical internet money, um, using like some program that you've written. Um, but like Web3, oh, that's such a hard like question to answer. Like, what is Web3? Without
Yeah.
comparing it to like a bunch of like other like Web2 and what came before that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've run into the problem of like I've looked it up and I've tried to understand what it is, but basically everything I've found is like it doesn't really exist. A full definition doesn't really exist right now. It's
Mm,
sort of just like being made and like manifesting itself still, which is like unhelpful for one.
yeah, yeah. It's
But
kind of
like,
one of those things where it's like if you know it, then if you know it, like you'll see it, you'll know it when you see it. But I think
yeah,
like decentralization is the thing that I sort of like cling on to. It's
mhm,
like doing stuff with no central like entity controlling anything. It's purely just like a bunch of random people all working in a system like decentralized, like it's peer to peer. I mean, going back to sort of like the banking example, like Web3 enables you to, for me and Nate, to like interact directly without having some middleman in the middle
mm,
taking like a cut of like some sort of bank transfer or having to facilitate that action. It's purely just like an organized group of people working in a like decentralized fashion where there's no one single point of failure.
yeah,
Um, that's kind of like what I think. But there's like heaps of different ways you can define it. I think people tend to say that like Web2, which is like think of like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, is very much like these companies built a platform and the users come along and provide the content and the business monetizes that content. And then like in Web3, it's kind of like random people get together and they all use this like decentralized infrastructure that no one owns, like these computers that no one owns, and like they all share like a business and create value together without yeah, I don't know. That's actually, and this is kind of like what I'm doing at the moment, which is like taking a step back from working in Web3 and like thinking about some of these really fundamental questions because it's super
yeah,
important. And like just the fact that I can't even like have a clear, succinct answer to like what is Web3 is
mm,
definitely something I'm going to go away and think about because one of the questions that I've been thinking about heaps recently is like, what is, then from my time working Web3, I sort of was like, okay, people throw around this phrase like, when will crypto see mass adoption? And it's like, okay, well, what is mass adoption? Like, who are the masses, and like, what does mass adoption even mean? And like,
mm,
you'd be surprised. Like, I met and spoke to so many crazy intelligent people like over the last like year or two working in the space, and like didn't speak to anyone about this. And it's such a key like thing. It's so fundamental, but like no one really speaks about it. Um, Yes, I
yeah,
mean that's a good question.
yeah. I think also like I want to know what like obviously like we know what decentralized finance is or just like decentralization is, but I guess like what are some pitfalls of decentralization? And obviously like there's benefits, but like
Mm,
what are like the trade-offs? What are the
yeah,
benefits?
yeah.
What are the cons sort of thing?
Super, super obvious one. I mean, like the first real clear, like terrible thing that happens in DeFi is anyone can build a banking system, and because of that, or a banking and payment system, you can get people who have no idea what they're doing, or just like
Mm,
people who have good intentions, but like inadvertently build some sort of banking system that has like a flaw in it that you lose all everyone's money. Like every month, there's like at least one or two exploits in DeFi where there's like some sort of protocol, like a lending and borrowing protocol, like getting credit, or um, like a trading protocol where you can go and trade crypto assets, and there'll just be some security vulnerability that someone's missed, like when they were coding up the
yeah.
smart contracts. Um, It's decentralized. It doesn't go through the same, like it doesn't adhere to regulations. It's not insured. You can't just go to, if they lose your money, you can't just go to, Westpac or your local branch and be like, hey, someone, hacked my account and took my entire life savings. Can I have some of my money back because it's insured? That doesn't exist in DeFi because there's no central party that's taking responsibility for that. It's purely like decentralized. It's a wild west. Everyone, everyone's out to like, you sort of have to have your wits about you. So that's like the first thing. It's just like you don't get that sort of level of safety that you do with like traditional finance. I mean, at least speaking to like you and me in Australia, like our banking system, we can go to the bank. We know our money's going to be there. I can send you money via Westpac, and I know you'll get it in a day, or like you'll probably get it instantly in most cases. But there are places in the world where their banking, like their infrastructure, they've got rampant corruption or whatever it might be, and they don't have those same opportunities.
Do you think like all these central bank digital currencies, do you reckon they'll take off in a good way? Do you reckon they'll be adopted in a good way? Or like, I mean, my thinking is sort of just like it'll either just be pushed and then people just adopt it like forced on it and it'll just become the new thing, or I mean, I guess they're not really going to give anyone an option, right? I would imagine.
Well, you're saying, are you saying like, will this set like the central backed, like will the central versions of these digital currencies be adopted in a good way, or you just mean in general, like will crypto?
No, just like the central ones. Yeah.
I'm kind of bearish on them, to be honest, because so like one of the other trade-offs with decentralization is that like the actual technology itself. So if you just get rid of all the hype and buzzwords, like we're talking about distributed systems, and that is just like this is how all blockchains work. It's just like a huge group of people get together. They all have like laptops and stuff, and all those laptops talk to each other. And like just by the fact that they have to all talk to each other to agree on, everyone agrees that Nate has $10. Everyone agrees that Aidan has $10. It's like that's how sort of blockchains kind of work. They'll have to agree that on the state of the network, the state being like your account balance. But because they all have to talk to each other and agree, that's like super slow because you have to send a message from your laptop and to someone else's laptop, or so it's like this really slow, inefficient thing. So from a technical standpoint, one of the massive drawbacks of like these decentralized systems, these distributed systems, is that they're like quite slow and inefficient. Like if you want to revamp the banking system, like with the best, latest tech that you could, in a centralized way, they could absolutely do it. There's just no real incentive for them to do it at the moment. And it would be infinitely faster. Like it would be so much better. But there's no incentive for them to do that. And because of that, like there's no real value in, I mean, there probably is, but like on the surface level, like it would seem strange that like a central entity would adopt like distributed systems and blockchains and stuff just because like for no other reason other than the fact that it's like in the zeitgeist and people are like talking about crypto. Like they don't really, unless they're integrating with like these well-known networks like Ethereum, like these open networks that are like properly decentralized. That's a whole nother discussion. But like Bitcoin and Ethereum, where where they could interact with just like random people building software on the blockchain. That would be, if they were going to do that, like that would be a cool use case, and then I'd probably be more bullish on it and think that it's like probably going to be more widespread. But given that all these banks have to adhere to a bunch of regulations, they can't just like integrate with the wild west if they wanted to. They're probably going to have their own, I mean, they call it central backed digital currencies or whatever it is. They probably won't do that. They'll just have their own private blockchains that have like their own deployed currencies on it, which sort of doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really make sense because you don't get the value of the decentralization. You just get all the bad bits, which is it's really slow.
I was just thinking it's sort of like you're using this like technology that's good for decentralization, but then you're not even decentralizing it. You're keeping it decentralized.
Exactly.
You're like no point of it.
You get all the downside and none of the upside. But that is the super bear case, and like they're probably, it's hard. Who knows like what some of these people are going to do, whether or not they're going to integrate with like the broader ecosystems.
Do you think though, like obviously, I mean, at the moment, maybe because it's still like so early, it's always around like financial services, finance, money, blockchain, and money. But like, do you see maybe further down the line of the future being blockchain being used a lot, but not for money, for other things?
Oh, it's interesting. It's interesting because like at its core, like it's super core value proposition for like these proof of stake blockchains is
Mm.
that like you can send like you can transfer like a token or like an asset like in a decentralized way. So it's kind of its core. Like there are some cool use cases. It just depends on how you define like away from finance. Because I was at a conference last year in Copenhagen. It was like the Polkadot Decoded conference. And their ecosystem, like the Polkadot ecosystem, is very much like I think there's one DeFi protocol there. The rest of them were just sort of like a bunch of really random sort of use cases for crypto. And there's one company, I can't remember the name. I feel like it was called Peak with a Q. Um, they basically used crypto as a way to sort of crowd fund like Teslas, like the car, and then like get people to drive them for ride sharing, and then the people that actually participated in the crowdfunding get like the revenue that's generated from that. But I guess like
Right.
that sort of is like pretty tied to like making money and finance, etc. I
It's
know
an
that like
elaborate plan.
yeah, I mean it was cool. Like because
Yeah.
they talk that same company was talking about like crowdfunding, like wind farms and like generating electricity, like sustain using the
Yeah.
whole like generate sustainable energy pitch, and then like pay back the people who actually um who funded it. But yeah, like I think the so actually really funny. Well, actually, it's probably not that funny, but way back in the day when I first started out in tech, I was working at this company called Redify. It's like a consulting company in Melbourne,
Mhm.
and we were like an Azure partner. So Azure is like a Microsoft platform, that a cloud computing platform that offers like servers, databases, like all this stuff that you basically like if you're starting a tech business, you go to AWS or you go to Google or you can go to Azure, which is Microsoft offering. And at the time, like blockchain was like a massive buzzword, and they had their own offering where you could like go into their little portal and like spin up your own blockchain. But
Mm.
their use case that they pitched it for was logistics. Like it was got sort of like I guess like less to do with
Uh,
finance. But that's like and whenever you hear like big institutions talking about like the tech behind blockchains, they always talk about this logistics use case. And like I don't fully understand it, but I'm pretty sure it's to do with like supply chains and how like you have like a supply chain of like 10 different businesses working together, and the business at the end needs to know that the business like at the start is good for the money or something well ahead of time, um, so that they can start production early enough. And I think the idea is that with like a because one of the other things that blockchains are good for is transparent. Like you can see everything that's
yeah.
happening on the
Yeah.
chain. You can see Nate's balance of money. You can see Aidan's balance of money. They ahead of time can be like, okay, this company is good for the money or whatever. Like they're abiding by this smart contract. Like we can start production and then we'll be certain to get like paid for it ahead of time. So it's meant to like reduce like all the issues with logistics. But yeah, I think that's the only other. That's just like
Yeah.
another
That's
common
interesting.
use case you hear people pitch blockchain tech to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw actually one time, I forget it was some video. I honestly don't remember what it was from, but they're talking about in like third world countries, or I guess like more developing countries where people don't necessarily have like for where they live. Say like you live in a village or like
Mm,
some area, there is like no record that anyone actually owns that land or area or house. So some businesses sort of made like this map with coordinates, and basically it's like if you do own this certain bit of land on the map, it's like in these coordinates that they can put your name and your details on like a block in a blockchain, and then like that's proof that you live in that area. So it's like really
interesting.
interesting way to think about it, because like that's solving a pretty big problem, I guess. Not that we know much about that problem, but like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting point, and that's something that like I'd ask you. It's like because lots of times, especially in like an industry that's like full of like VC money, like it's super hypey. It's like does does a blockchain like does a distributed system actually solve that problem? Like, could you not just build like a centralized version to solve that same problem? I'm not saying I know the
yeah.
answer to that, but like it's a constant question that I ask myself because like I've seen so many teams pitch like the next craziest thing that's like, oh my
Mm,
God, this is some crazy tech. But it's like, okay, well, why do we need to do that in a decentralized way? Like, is there a reason behind that? There could be, but like, I don't know. I usually my gut feeling on that stuff is most of the time my default answer is you can probably don't need blockchain to solve it.
more
But
the only with that one, my only thing to mention on that is potentially the like government corruption, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because
So I
like
mean,
the
again,
governments, the centralization can't even do it, but there is a way to do it decentralized. I
do
guess.
it in a decentralized way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, do it in a decentralized way. Um, like potentially like that. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's like always like, oh, like do this with blockchain, do this with like this kind of tech, but it's like, is that even necessary?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Who's like
remember for
trying to
eight.
use this technology?
Oh, the like it's kind of like a long running joke, but everyone's like, oh, decentralized Uber is like the golden, like when someone figures that out, that'll be the day. It's just like, no, like come on. I mean, maybe. I mean, I could be corrected. Who knows? But we'll see.
So so obviously I don't even think we've mentioned. I mean, I guess we have mentioned, but like not explicitly that you are a software engineer.
Hmm.
When did you start coding? Actually,
Pretty late actually. I think I first started computer science, like my first unit that I studied was in 2016. So
oh
what,
wow.
like 7 years ago? Um,
Did you start
Definitely.
at all before that though? Like a hobby or anything?
So like, yeah, but nothing serious. Like growing up, like I've always been into like video games, like playing around the computer. Like I used to love this game called RuneScape. Like me and my friends spent
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
hundreds of hours on that game. Funnily enough, it's actually like I hear it getting related to cryptocurrency like so often just because of the like little micro economy that they have in that game. Um, but yeah, like so grew up like playing computer games and like just being good with computers and like I just always, fuck around with the computer at home. Um, and then yeah, so like occasionally you'd like break out some HTML because you watch some YouTube video that was like, oh, here's how you like, I don't know, jailbreak your iPhone, and then you're like, oh, I'm a hacker, like I'm coding or something like that,
Yeah,
which
those are
is
the
like
days.
so not. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, before that, just pretty much like no coding at all. And then yeah, I went on exchange actually to Malaysia, so I did a semester of study over there. So actually, if I
Nice.
just take a step back, like so that when I first started at uni, I was doing a Bachelor of Business. And it was the dumbest thing ever. Like I purely did a Bachelor of Business because in high school, like all my mates, like most of them were tradies and like none of them were going to uni. Like they're all doing VCAL. And I
Yeah.
had like one mate who was like gonna go to like he was smart as and he was gonna go to uni. And he was going to do business. But like in high school, I just did like chemistry, physics, like all those subjects that had nothing to do with like business or anything like that. I never did
Mm.
like business or anything. Um, and I got into this degree, like it was like a Bachelor of Biotechnology or something at Monash, and all the results came out, and my mate, I was like, "Oh, what'd you get into?" He's like, oh, "I'm doing business at Caulfield," and I was just like, "All right, I'm going to change what I'm doing," just to be with him because I didn't want to go by myself. So anyway, I switched into the Bachelor of Business, and then failed all 8 units. Like my first year, I failed every single unit. Like just I
Classic.
was way too young, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life at all, like so immature, like you fucking first real girlfriend, like going out and partying, like all the stock standard stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so after that year of failing everything horribly, I like Monash were like, yeah, get out. And I was like, please let me go and study like what I initially was going to study, like I didn't know what I was doing. And like, yeah, all right, come back and study biotech. And biotech was actually sick, like because I just love learning, I think in general, and so
What
those
what
science.
what is biotech exactly? Because I've heard that a lot and I've seen it, but I have
Yeah.
no
Well,
idea.
it's kind of like I mean, the like prosthetics and stuff, and like sort of how technology interacts with like human physiology, and like
Okay.
I mean, and I only studied it it ended up only being half a semester because so it was really interesting and I loved it. Um, but I wanted to like I had this first year of like failure and I was just like I was so lost and I was enjoying the content but I was bad at uni, like I didn't study, hated going to labs and stuff. And someone was like, I think actually this was spurred on by like an ex-girlfriend, and I was like she broke up with me and went overseas, so I was feeling like I really had to go overseas and like travel and explore.
Yeah.
um and I was like, all right, I'm going to do exchange. Like, where can I go on exchange? And Monash were like, oh, you can go to Malaysia. We have a campus over there. I was like, sick, sign me up. They're like, you can't go because you're studying biotech. I was like, that makes no sense. And they're like, you have to study like a more general degree to go over there. Like biotechs, they don't offer any of your units over there. And I was like, oh, okay. So I switched out of biotech to go into science so that I could do exchange. So then when I was doing science, I mean, it was pretty much the same stuff. There's only like a few electives that were different. Um, Anyway, moved into science. I'm just realizing I'm telling you my whole life story.
No, this is
Moved
good.
in,
This is good.
moved
Content.
in, moved into science, and I was doing like physiology and biochem were sort of my majors. So like just random, like just about the human body, like anatomy, that kind of stuff. And then biochemistry is kind of like how like the chemicals interact with like the human body, and like you sort of do a little bit of like pharmaceutical stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but like again, I was still an average student. I had no passion about what I was studying at all. It was purely just to like go on exchange, and like Monash were giving out grants to like go on exchange, and Malaysia's super cheap to live. So basically went over there with no money. So like I come from a family that doesn't have like never had lots of money. Like dad was a truck driver, mum was like a nurse, like barely had any money ever. Um, so this was like I was like, oh sick, this is a fully funded trip. So went over to Malaysia. I'm getting to the point as to why I was telling you this whole story. When I was in Malaysia, same thing happened. Like I failed like all my units except for one. I actually I'm just remembering this now. Such a ridiculous story. But went there doing a full load of science. I was living with seven. Like they put you in like this big apartment building with like everyone else doing exchange. Um, and it was kind of cool. So basically, like there's this Monash had this like huge like 20 story like apartment building with heaps of rooms in there, and like all the locals who study at Monash live in there, but they have one floor allocated to exchange students. So this one floor, which was loose as like just all these people from all over the world doing exchange, like just got put into this like single floor. It was just like chaos. Like this is a Muslim country, so like no alcohol or anything like that. You weren't allowed to
Yeah.
do all that stuff, so you had to like sneak it all. And just this one floor was just like the loosest place. But anyway, I had a really good group of housemates. I had this one Aussie bloke named Schulte, and he was like a few years older than me at the time, and he had his own online business. Um, he he was selling like this super random mix of things. He was selling um, like fitness gear, like just like yoga mats, like that, think that kind of stuff, and then
Yeah.
also like baby strollers, but like on two different sites. He was basically like drop shipping through
Yeah. Yeah.
eBay at the
Right.
time, and he was making good money doing that. And his housemate actually was making like I think he was making $100,000 a year selling
Wow.
Gold's Gym singlets. Like it was crazy. Like this was like this is the first time I'd heard about like e-commerce and like all the opportunities that you could do like working for yourself in this
Yeah.
area. But anyway, he was showing me his store, and he basically like back in the day on eBay, I'm not sure what it's like now, but you could basically like code up your own front end for your eBay store. So you could like write HTML and put like fancy headings and like, put all these animations on your page. And I was like, oh, that's sick. Like you're coding or whatever. And like he wasn't coding, he was just getting like templates off the internet. But it was like, I was like, oh, that's cool. Maybe I'd be interested in that. So that kind of like got me interested in like sort of like entrepreneurship or like building your own business.
Yeah.
I'd been interested in that kind of stuff before, but this is the first time I'd actually met someone who had their own business who was actually doing it. Um, anyway, so as soon as I met him, this was like first week or two, because you get there before the semester starts. I dropped all of my science units and like just switched to business units. It was so stupid. And these were the same units that I failed the first time. Although this time I only so I did 3 units, so I underloaded because we wanted to do heaps of traveling.
Hmm.
So I was like microeconomics, macroeconomics, and marketing. I failed the two economic subjects. They were interesting, but I just failed them because I
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
too busy partying and traveling and shit. And I passed the marketing one because it's actually really interesting, but mainly because we were English speakers, so like we'd get really good grades because it was mainly just like written and like communication.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
You'd probably know about that because you did
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah. 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 I've done also the macro and microeconomics classes.
Oh, have you? Yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't like them.
yeah. Um, so anyway, that was sort of like an eye opener, and I was kind of like at that point, I was like, oh, this would be cool, and I had this idea to like that gave me an idea to start a business, which I won't go into. That's a whole nother story. But
Yeah.
basically, got back from exchange, and I was just like, oh, maybe I should, do something different, and I started looking at sort of like programming, and actually. I can't remember if this happened first. I'm pretty sure a mate of mine came up to me and wanted to like build this surfing app, and I was like at the time looking into programming and like what it meant to be like a coder or a dev at the time, or like hacking. I probably like one of my Google searches was probably like how to be a hacker or something like that. It's ridiculous. Um, and I should also mention another driving factor of this as well is that when you're like looking up like how to solve lots of these problems in like computer science and software engineering, one of the common websites you'll go to or hear about is like Stack Overflow.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically just like, it'll just heaps of people just post their answers to like these errors that you find when you're like coding stuff. And on the side of their website, there's this big banner of like software engineering job, LA, like, $300,000 a year, fully remote, like, all these ads of just like crazy pay. I
Yeah,
remember
wow.
seeing that early on and being like, far out, that's wild. And I was like, that would be crazy. I didn't really fully consider it, but that was definitely in the back of my mind. And at the time, I was also listening to like startup podcasts as well.
Yeah.
After meeting this guy who had his eBay store, he sort of got me inspired, and I was like listening to these startup podcasts, and I was just like, whoa, I could be a founder of like a tech company and like raise all this money, blah blah blah. Anyway, so I was back in Melbourne, and I started doing like playing around with like some programming. I was learning. I feel like I was doing like basic HTML. It wasn't really programming,
Yeah.
but after chatting with some friends, I was like, oh, I'll just do like a single programming unit at uni. Like I'm not enjoying uni. I'll just try some super random project. Sorry, super random unit. I just did this like introduction to programming unit. I remember it was such an interesting experience. I went to the first lecture and like I went in there and this guy was just explaining like this really basic thing in programming. It's called like for loops. And
Yes.
it's the most basic thing. It's like literally the first thing you do when you like look at programming. It's like how you define a variable, and the next bit is like for loops.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, it clicked. As soon as he started talking about this, I was just like, whoa, this is sick. Like I feel like I understand how the world works. Like as soon as I had this lecture, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And I immediately was like, oh, this is like what I want to do. Like this is
Yeah.
I'm at uni and I'm like enjoying it. And like never had I experienced like actually fully loving what I was learning. Um,
Yeah, it's
and
great.
actually, one little side tangent of that is that I can remember that week, like I was at the supermarket and I was like, I know, like at the checkout using the FPOS machine. And I remember I was scanning my card and I was like, oh, I bet you they're using like this for loop in here. And I was just like, oh, this is sick. Like, this is definitely what I want to do. Um, so yeah, that would have been, I think that was 2016 when I did that first unit in programming. And then after that, like during that year, I like switched degree again and like I tried really hard to get good marks and then get into computer science. You didn't actually need that good marks, but I just had such a bombed score from all my failures that it was like kind of hard to get
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I switched into computer science.
That's like I can relate with the whole like the bombing of the scores because my first year of uni was trash. But like
Yeah.
I'm interested to know like obviously now are you you've been working Web3, you've been at some startups, you've were working at Vanguard, Deloitte, like some pretty big names. Now you're looking to be in more of a founder. Like I just want to like understand the change from like Aidan who's failed a bunch of shit and not doing well at this stuff
Mm,
to Aidan now, and like what's changed? What did something happen? Like your perspective is changed, or is it just the fact that you are now doing something you're more interested in? Like, are you more open to like the more opportunities available to you, or just
yeah,
realizing, yeah,
definitely. Definitely one of the things is like the opportunities available to you. Like, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't driven by like money at all. Like,
yeah,
never, like literally, like until I started uni in like 2012 or something. Like, my parents were paying my rent like for the entire time, and like they had no money. And like
yeah,
I just like forgoed so many like just uni events. It's like real cheap. Just looking back on it, I was thinking about this the other day. There's just like uni parties that were like $20 to get into, and I just like wouldn't go because I'd be like, oh, $20 is too much. Like, and
yeah,
I'm not like saying like poor me, like I'm just so poor, but I was just like at the time I just didn't have any money, and I was just like it would be sick to not be stressed about money all the time. Like you'd get a speeding ticket because I was such a dickhead. I'd get a speeding ticket and it would like ruin my month because I'm like fuck, like not only does dad have to pay my entire rent, I now have to like be like, can I have double that so I can pay for this speeding ticket? Like
yeah,
I hated that, and like that definitely was a driving factor. Is that like I'd see this banner on Stack Overflow of all these like super high paying jobs of something that I loved, and I was like, oh okay, well if that must exist. So like I would like to do that. Like if I can do what I love and get paid for it. So
and
that
now
was definitely yeah.
I was just gonna quickly ask like, and now do you feel do you feel like you're in a position now where you're like more financially stable, or is money like much of an issue these days, or
Is it?
yeah,
I mean, well, I actually went through this learning. It was a good life lesson actually, and that is that like so. I mean, I'm still broke. Like I'm living at my girlfriend's place, like pretty much rent free at the moment. But basically, like I got my first job, and it was like I want to say it was $55,000 a year plus super, which like, and again, like I won't like blurt any other numbers, but just as a starting point, like
is
that's
this
what I got out of uni.
is this Deloitte
No,
or
no, this is just like actually this was so sorry. This was the very so this is actually my second job. The first job I did was a like an internship at Redify, and that was like that counted for some of my degree for computer science, and they
Mhm.
paid you for that. It was the best thing ever. Like if
Nice.
anyone if listens to this that's considering doing IBL at Monash, do it. It is like the best thing ever. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah. If anyone listens to this,
no,
legit.
I
If
didn't want
anyone
to
is
assume
out
that it'd
there
be. I feel like it's a niche market of people in computer science wanting to do RBL. I'm like, I have no idea.
at
Um,
Monash in
just
particular.
secretly flaming Nate just mid podcast.
No, it's so
No, no,
true.
but like I got this job at this company called Ocean Software, and like that, I mean, that is amazing. Like just to at that time, that was the most money I'd ever seen in my life. I was like, holy shit! Like I'm going shopping, and I remember like I bought like after the first paycheck, I spent it in like 2 days, and it was like it wasn't that much money. I mean, it was heaps for me at the time, but like just obviously being self-aware, there's people who earn heaps more, and there's obviously people that don't aren't as fortunate and earn a lot less. But for me at the time, it was like so much money, and I went out and bought like all these new shoes, like clothes, like my friends knew me for just wearing this same black hoodie, like the same pair of tracksuit pants for pretty much like my entire degree. I'm not even joking. Like people would actually probably be able to like visually recall the Obey hoodie that I wore. So anyway, it was life changing for me, and I was like, okay, this is great. Like all of a sudden, like all my stresses like went away. Um, and like just for some more, I just realized there's like a little more backstory. Is that like so? My dad passed away. He had cancer, and this was like during my time at uni. And my mum, who used to be a professional psychiatric nurse, she had to get brain surgery. She had this thing called hydrocephalus, which is like some
Mhm.
weird fluid build up in the brain. But anyway, it requires brain surgery, and it like it's a pretty gnarly procedure, but it like really messed up her short term memory. So she was no longer able to work. So she's like a regular functioning person, but just like has like poor short term memory. But
Mhm.
anyway, this is all happening when I'm at uni, and like my sister, like at the time, I think she might have just been finishing studying, but like no one could really support themselves and their family at all. So for me, it
Mhm.
was like I like stopped uni and I was like, I'm just gonna work. I'm gonna get a job as a software engineer and get some money because like fuck having no money and being stressed all the time and like missing out on all these like parties and stuff. Like I want to do this. This is like what I like doing. So got that job. I was stoked, had heaps of money, and then continually seeing that Stack Overflow banner of like these high paying software engineering jobs. After like a year of working in that space, I was like, I'm going to just start applying for like these crazy jobs and just see if I can get like, like a crazy salary. So I was really motivated by like earning heaps of money. I remember like specifically targeting trying to earn over like six figures, which is like in tech quite easy to do.
Yeah.
Um, and like I got this job and like I was like, I remember telling all my friends, and I was like wearing like a badge of honor, like, oh, I'm getting this crazy job, like this huge pay rise, like, I'm going to be rich kind of thing. Um, it's at this like e-commerce clothing store. It's like the people that own like Superdry, like that own all these like other clothing brands.
Yeah.
And it was in this like Port Melbourne office, like really dingy place. It was a cool like it felt like a startup vibe. It was like in this big warehouse with like ping pong tables and stuff. Um, I was miserable. Like I was there for like 2 weeks and I got my first paycheck. And after my paycheck, I was like sick. I have like that was a crazy paycheck, but I was like, the work is not fun at all. Like the dev team was myself and three others, and I was the second most senior. And I was like, I'd only been
Oh
working for like
wow.
2 years, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like I'm not going to learn anything. And like I was like so miserable, and that was like a huge for me. And it sounds cliche, but it was like a huge moment for me where I was like, oh, like there actually is more to life than money, and like
Mhm.
that didn't even take that much money to understand. Like usually you hear people talking about like, oh, I earned like millions and millions of dollars before I realized that. But to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, actually, because I was going home and I was like crying pretty much. I was like, I'm so like I'm so lost. Like I have this great job that's paying heaps of money, but like I'm not happy. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I learned that lesson pretty early on, and I'm like kind of glad I did, because it sort of made me realize like, all right, I need to like work towards something that makes me happy. And like obviously with like my dad passing away, one of the things I took away from that was it's like, what is the point of doing something that doesn't make you happy? Is if you're gonna like just die, or like which sounds
yeah,
like super bleak, but like you could spend your entire life. Like I remember dad having like quite a few regrets like towards the later stage of his life because he was like he did all this shit that he didn't want to do, because he wasn't like he was doing what he thought like was supposed like what was expected of him, but like not what he actually wanted to do. And like some
yeah,
people are not in the position to actually pursue their dreams. Like I'm obviously fortunate enough to be in that position where I can. But to me, that was one of the big takeaways. And so like from there, I was like, all right, well, I love tech, I love coding. Money's great, but that's not the be all and end all. Luckily in tech, you can just get money pretty much wherever you go. So it was very much like, all right, the common theme with all these companies I've worked at is that like there's lots of people who have worked there for like 10 years or 20 years, just like that don't have any interesting ideas and they're stuck in this old tech. And I was like, okay, I want to work at places for like no longer than a year and just like learn as much as I can and like see how like each different business does things. Because I remember like I started my career like at the same like two IBL students went to Redify. Like one of them was me and another mate was Sam, and he was really good at the time. Like he knew heaps of like front end stuff. Like all I remember feeling like super inadequate. Like it was just basically two students from Monash came in and everyone was like frothing this Sam guy because he knew heaps of shit and I was like fresh as. And I was just like, oh my god, like this guy's so much better than me. Um, but he stayed at Redify and like I moved on to a different business and like I immediately saw like this whole new like view of tech that like Redify didn't show me. It was like this business did things like use all this other different technology, like just completely operated differently. And I was like, whoa, this is like eye opening. This is changing how I'm thinking about tech, like how I'm going about problem solving. And like I kept doing that and like I still occasionally keep in touch with Sam and I just like think about like the two different pathways and like obviously one's like a very niche, narrow way of doing things and you like really specify in one area. But like, yeah, for me, it was just like, there's such a, like tech just never ends. Like you're never going to catch up with everything. And so like being a part of like trying all these different spaces out. So like, as you mentioned, like I went to Deloitte for a bit to see what big consulting companies were like. I went and did Vanguard Investments, which was like a massive enterprise with like heaps of bureaucracy, like way
mm,
different environment for developing software. Like, if you want to release to production, far out, there's so many times, like if you want to release to production in a big enterprise, it takes like, you need a day or two notice. And usually it's like release cycles. You do it like once a month, maybe.
yeah. Right. Okay.
For
I mean, that
Vanguard, it's like,
makes sense.
yeah. And then like in the financial services industry, it's like, not only do you need to like, it's this big slow beast, but it's also like, you need heaps of people to sign off on it because it's like you're dealing with real people's money.
Yeah.
And so like we'd stay up to like 9 p.m. and that's like when we could get in touch with like the US team to make sure it's all good and like this big something you'd never experience just working in a small product company like in
Yeah.
Melbourne, like in a little clothing store or something like that. I
So
can't even remember where the start of that conversation was.
no, that's cool. I think I'm also just getting curious now, like moving on from all this experience so far for you in your life and your career. What do you think are like the core most important things with maybe starting a startup, starting a business, tech business, just in general? Like after everything you've learned, all these businesses you've been at, what are you picking up?
Mm,
What are you taking? What are you leaving at?
they kind of, I mean, it's probably going to sound a bit cliche, and I'll probably listen back to this and be like, oh, I forgot the most basic thing. Um, I think there's like one real obvious one is that you have to have a clear vision. Like, and relying on someone else for that vision is like not the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I used to think that, if I was going to start a business, like I would be so happy just building the tech side of things and someone else can take care of the business side of things. Which gets you some of the way, but like for you to really execute and like have belief in yourself, like you really have to like have a vision of what you want to build. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of like a recent lesson that I learned. Is just like, you have to fully back yourself in like what it is. And if you're not sure like what it is that you're building, like maybe you need to think about like, something else. Um,
So before we move on, I guess to one of the next things,
yeah, yeah.
if there was for vision, like what would you say to people who want a vision but they don't have a vision? Like how do you even get to a vision? Because I think like in my life and a lot of experience that I've had is like people, and it's not just for like starting a business, it's for anything. It's
Mm,
like they want to make a change, they want to do something, they want to change something about their life or change a habit. But I think at the core of it comes down to like being able to visualize it, being able to have a
mm,
vision of what that really is, and then
mhm.
seeing that and then actioning to become that.
Yeah,
So it's like applicable across everything. So yeah, like what
absolutely.
what do you think?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind is just like, and it sounds like, I don't know, like cliche, but like go out there and like get not experience, but like go live an interesting life, do something, like go traveling or like go work at a bunch of different companies. Don't just like, don't just like settle at one place. Like the world is massive and there are so many businesses out there. Like people have, I feel like, and this could just be like a tech bubble thing, that people have this assumption that like, if you leave a job before the end of a year, like if you work at a job for less than a year, you'll never get hired again. It's like, well, there's so many businesses. How could that even be true? Like you can
Yeah,
you can go and find work. Like if you're a skilled person, like a skilled worker, if you're lucky enough to have like a degree or something like that, which can get you a job, like go try more things. Like get inspired. Like I mean, like I only know what I want to do because I was stupid at the time, but like I just like when things were like not like making me happy, I just like quit and be like, all right, I'll try something else. So
yeah.
I
And I guess
just,
it comes with just
yeah,
trying a bunch of shit that you realize you actually don't like, and it's I guess it's like doing the stuff you don't like gets you to the stuff that you do like,
yeah,
which is like
exactly.
I don't know, it's sort of like counterintuitive because you just want to like know. But
Yeah,
I mean, for example, you said like you can't. People think typically, I guess people think like if you quit a job before a year, whatever, it's hard to get another job. But I mean, I did that exact thing. Like I mean, fortunately for me, I could go back to my old job because I had still like a good network of good connections. But I literally was working at a media agency 3 months, maybe 3 months, like maybe like just 3 months on the dot actually.
mm,
And I just said to them like, look, this is not for me. Like I quit. I don't want to do this. This is like completely for me wasting my time, and it's not getting me where I want to be.
yeah.
And I think also like maybe people don't realize that future employers, if you just tell them and be honest and like, hey, I tried this thing, I really didn't like it, and I quit. Like I didn't, it wasn't for me. I'm on a new chapter, a new step in my life, and here I am. I think that's like a way more respectable thing than just
Oh,
being like,
absolutely.
I
Like
don't want to quit. Yeah,
who wants to, like, I mean, if I would never want to hire someone who just like cruised straight through uni and they got a job at the end of it and like, okay, cool.
yeah,
Nice one, zombie. Like, did you think about you, like, what made you happy? Like,
yeah,
that's just like such a boring way to live. And it's like, have some life experience. Like go out there and fail. And this sounds like, I mean, I'm only 30. Like I don't feel like I'm a master on this topic, but like I just feel like just that just seems kind of obvious. Just go out there and like try a bunch of shit. Like be interesting. Like at the end of the day, like I kind of think of job interviews as like they're going to be working with you like 9 to 5 in a traditional sense.
mm,
Like are you going to be fun to work with? Like, I mean, I guess there's probably like different use cases. Like, I imagine if you're working at Google or NASA, they probably need you to be pretty qualified. but,
yeah.
but yeah,
I think like with this is another thing I've sort of thought of recently as well is like you be like I think there's like a level of maturity that makes you way more hireable. Uh, Even if you have like less experience or something like this, I feel like if you just go into some sort of position or like job interview and you have this experience that's giving you more maturity, that is actually more valuable than someone coming out of uni with a degree. They might be more qualified, they might be more skilled, but the different level of like maturity and perspective and awareness is way, way, way more hireable and rare, I would probably say, than just someone that's just gonna like do some tickets, do some work, and like that's
oh,
it
absolutely.
and be happy with this like their current position and not striving for like improvement or more or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, like at the core of it, like at the core of any business, it's like a problem that they're solving. And it's
Mm.
like, I mean, from my perspective, like if you're hiring someone, like you want a diverse range of like thinking and like problem solving. And so like getting people of like who have different like life experiences are going to come at
Mm.
problems in a completely different way and can offer something totally different to the problem space that you're working in. So that's another good reason.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, well, we sort of just touched on vision as one of the main things, main takeaways for startups or founding something or
Yeah,
just
yeah.
thinking in general. Anything else?
Yeah, I think like, I mean, some of these are like a little bit probably too concrete, but like, I think it's easy to get caught up in working on the wrong thing. Especially like this is probably from like an engineering perspective where like I've built things in the past where there's like 10 different things you can work on right now. Like say, I don't know, you could build a friends list or you could build like, some like new heading or new change the font or something like that. And it's like really, and this is something that just probably takes practice, but it's like really understanding like what is absolutely important into understanding like how, like what your product market fit is. Like, is doing this feature or like whatever it is this going to get you closer to understanding like how valuable your product or service is? Or is this kind of just like you're just deferring the hard thinking of like, fuck, what does my business actually do?
Yeah.
Um, like to me, and that was also something I kind of like reflected again on kind of recently. It's just like, yeah, it's just so easy to just like to just keep iterating on something. But if you look back after if you do that for a long enough time, in 6 months, like you look back on something in 6 months, you're like, oh well, this is pretty much the same product. It just looks slightly different. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, maybe you could have like really just stripped away all the bullshit. And like in 2 months' time, you could have tested it and been like, nah, this is not the go. Like, let's just do something completely different or like make a magnitude change somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's something that like I'm definitely trying to embody in my next venture, which is just like really focus on like what is important.
Yeah. Okay. That's a
And
good one.
actually, and on that same one, it also comes into it's also like along the same lines of like not like don't listen to what people say. Like form a strong opinion about. I just, it's like you do need to listen to people at like some parts, but like when you're, I mean, I guess this is kind of like tied into like having your own vision, but like I don't know, people will tell you that like there's a way to do things. Like there's a certain way to do something, and it's like sometimes you just need to be like, no, I don't care if that's the way that you want to do it. Like I
Yeah.
have this like new view of doing things. Like this is how I want to do it. Um, yeah.
How I agree completely with that. And
Mm,
actually no, I've picked up recently, I guess, like I know you have like a strong opinion on stuff, which is good in my opinion. It's much better than being like not opinionated on anything because I think it's
mm,
more productive to get anyone anywhere. And I guess like if someone had an opinion on something or if someone had their own view of something, how would you tell them to like bring that up or change that or tell that to someone? Like how do you kind of like bring up in a business aspect, hey, you've got your opinion about something, but here's mine and it's opposing? Like what's that
mm.
sort of like?
I mean, it's hard. Like it depends on what the differing of opinion is. Like obviously, like I'm an expert in technology. Well, like that would be like if I had a field to be an expert in, that would be the that would be what I'm an expert.
Self-proclaimed expert in technology.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
Um, LinkedIn expert in technology. Like it's in a way it's easy if it's like tech related because you can sort of just look at facts and be like, well, I
it.
know. I typically like I'm not combative. I typically try and be like, all right, where are the facts? Like, what are the assumptions that we're making? And like be like, okay, what is your point of view? What is my point of view? And then like just figure out what we're both assuming and like just completely like, okay, we're assuming this. Like, let's not base any of the discussion on the shit that we both don't know. Like, what do we actually know for sure? And then like sort of have the discussion around that because typically, and that's the other thing, like I'm not dog headed or I mean pig headed or whatever it is. Like I'll have a strong opinion that's really easy to change if you
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
provide some information or some data to back up what it is you're saying. Like I've had, like something that, and this is like advice that I'd give to any developer. I mean, almost just anyone. It's just good life advice. I feel like, but like just like people love it when you let them change your mind. So like if you go
Yeah.
into a conversation, you're having an argument. If you just go, oh, actually, that's such a good point. I completely changed my opinion. Like I think what you said is correct. People not only love that, but also like it's really good for you to just like be I don't know I can't remember the word, but like humble enough to just be like because like lots of the time people just want to like have the last word or like win the
Yeah.
argument, which is
Yeah.
just like oh get away from those people. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
that is
think
like
that's
that has gotten me very far. Like I can that is definitely a tangible thing that I remember very early on in one of my first jobs, like noticing that that is a good way to interact with people, and it like people then immediately like are really happy to come and talk to you because you're reasonable. Like you're not just like someone who's gonna just like hold their opinion forever until they die.
Yeah. That's really, I love that because I think I'm, I sort of had something, I don't even know what happened in my life, but I've gotten to this point of now. I just think like being reasonable is the most important thing when interacting with people, when having any like, I mean, if one of you is reasonable, and if either, I mean, if both parties are reasonable, then it turns any potential argument or a fight of anything into a discussion, and a discussion that gets to a conclusion. And like, I think it's really overlooked being reasonable, or people just like think they
Oh,
know what reasonable is, but they're not trying to be reasonable, and it just gets you so much further. Because I used to always, I mean, this is when I was like a teenager, but always just like have my opinion on something, and someone's telling me, and I'm just like, nah, like fuck you, I don't want to listen, I don't care. Like I think I know this, I haven't changed my perspective, but things have gone on, and now I'm like, I almost like want people to try to change my mind because that's only going to make me a better person and version of myself, and to be able to be like, oh yeah, true, like what I thought was, I mean, not necessarily like wrong, but what you're proposing is potentially better than that, and to be able to
mm.
accept that someone else's thoughts or someone else's opinions are better than your own is like so powerful.
That's
And
actually a great way that you phrase that, which is like if you come out like framing it as like, all right, look, I'm wrong. Like, tell me how I'm wrong. Like
yeah,
tell me where I'm wrong. Like, give them an opportunity to like correct you or like have their say is like such a good way to go about it.
yeah, because you just want to be, and this is obviously just my opinion, which could change, I guess, again. But like, you just want to be someone who can have any sort of conversation with anyone, be centered, be able to change your opinion on stuff, and not feel. I feel like also a lot of people get to a point of like, oh, if I change my opinion, like now I'm gonna look bad, or if I change my opinion, like I'm gonna look like an idiot. But you have to like forget about that and think about
Mm,
something a little bit bigger, and just continue living your life like that. And you just get, okay, cool, and then you just grow that skill. You grow that skill. Now maybe you can, more people around you are like that, and now you're just like working as like a collective mind rather than
oh,
just like running into each other and you don't know how to handle it. And I mean, this is also applicable across like everything in your
everything.
life,
It's
right?
just
It's not just
life.
business, it's like relationships, and I mean, whether it's like intimate or not, anything. And
Mm.
I just think like, yeah, it's cool that you say that because that's exactly what I think. That's exactly our
Yeah,
opinions are the same, so
yeah,
harmonious. But at the
yeah.
same time, like it's also funny because it's super logical, and that's exactly what a programmer would be saying.
Yeah, yeah. But it's funny though because like in the tech industry, like you do meet a lot of illogical people, which is like kind of weird and backwards. Because
Yeah,
this whole like I remember I was chatting to this senior dev at work, and he would refuse to see it my way, even though like I was definitely wrong. I was just some like young idiot who'd never had any experience ever, and we were arguing about something, and it was just like I was probably like being a hero and being like, oh, there's this new technology that you've never heard of. And this guy who's like been a veteran engineer for like 30, 40 years or something was just like, no, mate, like I've seen it all before kind of thing. Um, yeah, and he was just like, yeah, far out. I can't even. But yeah, that it was like that conversation with him where I changed my mind and I saw his reaction to that, and I was just like, oh, that's
yeah,
like effective as like now we're working together and like he respects me now, and now I can actually ask him something and he won't just like shit on me. It's great.
yeah, yeah. No, that's good. It's good. I think, I don't know. I just think like a lot of problems in like almost any situation just come from like that, people not willing to change their mind
Mm.
on stuff, which is, oh, it's just like problematic. It just gets in the way of, it
Bit
just
of
gets in the
self
way of
awareness goes
everything.
so far.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I've learned. I think just like in general, right, is just like self awareness is basically like the key to like everything. Like if you have someone that's self aware about something, then it just makes everything so much easier and more smooth, and then more
Mm.
productive and in any like facet of life. So
Yeah, yeah. I do
I don't
find
know.
though,
Yeah,
like I feel like I'm a pretty self-aware person, but I have noticed times where like I'll be too self-aware or like I'll be just like overly considering like how someone else is feeling, that it's like a stressful thing on me, and they're
Mm.
not even like, it turns out that they're like, it wasn't even an issue for them. So like
Yeah,
there is
yeah,
like
I'm
a
with you.
point where it's like sometimes you just do things and you just have to let them react to it how they're going to react to whatever it
Yeah,
is, and like that's all you can do.
yeah, for sure. I think you can. It's definitely easy to fall into like, I guess like sometimes you can think of like steps ahead,
Mm,
and if it's and then like based on that, then change what you're gonna do.
yeah.
But then I guess like that's where it just starts turning slowly into like anxiety or something like that.
That's literally what it is. It's
And you're
just
like,
full
ah,
anxiety.
shit. But yeah, look, that's good. I'm glad. Um, I'm glad that's like one of the core things that you've got to say, because this is like super important to me, which is awesome. And I don't really even think we have spoke about that before, so
Yeah,
it's
probably not. I don't think so.
yeah,
Don't think we ever sat down for a chat properly.
yeah. Like we haven't had a full official chat like this,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we were busy, lives were busy, which is good. But yeah, so did you have any other? So you had vision, work on the right stuff, which actually I came across a quote recently about sort of like touching on like working on the right stuff, which is similar to, or I'm just gonna like paraphrase this basically, but it's
Yeah, yeah.
um, be like competing in the right competition, be competing in the right game, and
Mm,
basically just the fact that a lot of the time people will be competing over something that's just like pointless competition, and they're getting hung up on these competitions, air quote competitions, which are basically like pointless and meaningless,
hmm.
and to make sure that you're not wasting your time on like pointless competition. And I'm just like, dude, that is
So,
so true.
yeah,
It's so real, because how much time I used to spend even as a kid, like, I mean, even in the last like 5 years of just like doing something because I like competition, but then it gets to a point of like, fuck, this is just like a waste of time now. And if I had just like let that shit go and focused on doing something else that was more beneficial and more valuable, like where I would be now would be like much higher, much greater.
yeah, right, yeah, massive. One other thing that just came to mind as well, actually, and this again, I feel like these are all kind of things that like you kind of intuitively know until like like you know it, but then like you do something that is like against that, or like you forget it for a bit, and then like you fail, and then you look back and you're like, oh fuck, it's because of those things. But one of them is like people say networking, and I used to never be able to sort of
Mm.
speak to like what the hell networking is. Like you're at uni and people go, "Oh, go to this networking night," and then people are like, "How do I network? Like what? Just like get on LinkedIn and just like connect with people?" Like, which is actually like a good form of networking itself. Um,
It is.
but like anyone that is working in an area that you're working in, like it could literally just be like maybe it is someone you've just met on LinkedIn. Like message them, and then like just like literally every week like have something in your calendar that is just like blocked out time for networking, like, and it's literally just like find every person that you've ever spoken to that you're working with or that's like kind of in the same industry, and then send them a random message, even if you don't get a response. Just constantly doing that, and then like one, it's just building the habit, but two, like after a couple of months, like these people go, oh shit, this person's like no joke. They've been messaging me like their
Mm.
progress or like whatever it is for the last couple of months. Then they're like, oh cool, like well this is what I'm working on. Like maybe we should catch up. Like you're clearly like not just someone taking the piss, because there's lots of people that just come in and take the piss. Like some like these people get really excited about like a new business venture, and they'll come in and be like, hey, I'm going to build this thing. Like do you want to be interested? Or like I'll cut you like 50% in my venture or whatever. And they're like, all right, well, I'm going to ignore that because that's just a little bit, we've all seen that before. But like
Yeah.
the people that like persist and that are like really, keep doing that, that's like super valuable. So like now, like this is like from a recent venture, but now like I have like dedicated time on my calendar to like actually reach out to like everyone, like keep these conversations warm. Even if you're not getting any responses, it can be a little
Mm.
bit painful. But yeah, just keep pinging people. Meet like I do another thing on LinkedIn, like I'll connect with people. Like there's always suggestions. I can suggest like a million people for you. Send them a message, be like, hey, I'm working on this at the moment. Are you working on anything exciting? Blah 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 blah. That is just so valuable. Like because
Yeah.
that's where like then you get an opportunity to meet these people in real life, and then the connections instantly better. And then like these people also just have like what people are usually most of the time pretty happy to just share their networks with you. So then you're all,
Mm.
all of a sudden in front of these crazy people which you never thought you'd be in front of. Like I remember like last year I met two people. Like one of these like foundational experiences I had in Web3 was listening to this like podcast about like the Terra Luna ecosystem. This is like before it crashed. For anyone listening, it's just like this massive catastrophe in crypto where lots of people got absolutely fucking shat on and lost lots of money.
Massive catastrophe.
It's actually tragic. But there was a podcast that I was really interested in. It was like these two people debating about, is this is it a scam or is it like real kind of thing? And I had no idea about what the technology was at the time. But anyway, these two people, like I just met them both on a call, like in the last like year of just working in the space because of just purely happenstance of networking. And I was just like, whoa, like it was crazy. Like I remember meeting one of them like early on, and then I met like the other one like kind of recently, and I was just like, this is crazy that like a year ago I was listening to these people on like the biggest crypto podcast, and now I've like just got them on my Telegram chats. Like it was wild. So yeah, networking is just like could not be it's so key.
Yeah, networking. As of like the last 6 months, I've just seen like networking and how impactful it is, which is incredible. And I think also like I found that sort of I like have always been like, yeah, cool, super keen on networking. Like I love talking to people, love meeting people, love like actually connecting with people, and have found like, man, it's actually super easy to network. But I think a lot of the time people in, I guess like maybe business or maybe it could be just like anything, right? Is that for some reason people think that because they're like a no one or because they aren't credible or something that they can't network or like they shy away from it and they don't do it. And I feel like I've met a bunch of people who are like good at something or could definitely do something, but like no network. And then it's like, okay, well, why don't you network? And it's like, oh, well, like who's going to reply to me? Or why would anyone want to network with me? And it's like, okay, well, you're not even giving yourself the opportunity because you never know. Plus, like you meet someone and you say, hey, dude, like what you're doing looks awesome, it looks great, but like, hey, like this is me, this is what I'm doing. Like literally, just like, hey, like I like what you're doing, but want to network, want to connect, and dude, people want to share. Like they're like, fuck, thank you. I'm so glad you came to me. Like it means a lot that you've even like gone out of your way to message me, and then they like want to share, just like you said before. They want to tell you because it probably makes them feel good. And I
100%.
if people come to me and like, Nate, can you tell me like this thing that you do, or talk to me more about this thing that you do, or who do you know that does something like this? Then I'm like, oh fuck yeah, fucking sick. I want to share all of that information with you.
People want to talk about like their passions. So like if you're at an event where you have like, I guess it's kind of questionable depending on who's at the event and what event it is. But most people like give you the time of day and be like, yeah, I'll talk about tech with you, like 100%. But that is like, it is a valid point. Like, because thinking about it, like there was heaps of times where there's networking events at uni and stuff where people are like, you can go to this networking event. I'll be like, but what do I do? Like, how do I start the conversation and then what? And I think people, at least I was under this impression that it's like, you just have this conversation with like you have this one conversation that's like this really meaningful conversation. It's like, no, you just like speed date. You just like talk to people, and then like once you finish chatting to them and it's kind of awkward, then you just go, all right, cool, I'm gonna go chat to someone else. But like one thing that really actually helped me with that is that like having your own project gives you something to talk about. Like after working in Web3 and having our own product, going to these events, like it never was a point of anxiety. Like I could just talk to someone and be like, okay, well, I'm going to be like, what do you do? That's good. I'm just going to be like, hey, what do you do? And then they'll tell me, and then they'll ask me what I do. I'm like, oh, well, I've built this app. This is what we do. Like I know everything about it because I built it. So like, just if it's something that you're like struggling with, like just, I could say just build an app, but like start your project, have some website, some placeholder website, and you're like, oh, this is what I do. Like I've got this like website, like this is what I'm interested in. Like, and it just makes it infinitely better. And then as soon as the conversation dies, you just go, cool, well, it's great meeting you. Like I'm going to go chat to this bloke over here or this chick.
For sure. And I think also like you could just like, you don't necessarily need to be using people all the time from a network that you've created. Like you said, you can, as soon as you have one person extra in your network, you actually have like their network, it's like, absolutely. I know obviously like Fab, I did like an internship with a company he used to work at, and like literally, I've just messaged two of the people at that company, like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? Like, I just know like of you. I was there. Like, you want to be on my podcast? I think it'd be super valuable. I think it'd be awesome. It'd be a good conversation. And like, bang, still waiting for a reply. But like,
They left me on red, but
but like, I mean, it's an opportunity, you know. And there's like
yeah, absolutely.
someone that I've messaged recently who I just know them. I don't even know them. I just know like their sister, but I know them. So I'm just like, yo, podcast, and like, yeah, they're interested. It has like no, it would never have happened. Like, you can't just expect some opportunities to like make themselves for you and like put them in your face. Like, you got to be at least open to trying to get anywhere, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's like
This
vulnerable to what
re-
though? Like what? That
no,
a
but it's
message that says nothing back? Like fuck, who cares? They're just fucking
vul-
some.
vulnerability has been such a key like theme in my life recently. I don't know what it is, but like I've just seen, I've always been as, you know, in the last like uh I don't know when it sort of started, but like there was a certain like point in my life where I started thinking like, okay, well, vulnerability is actually like powerful, and in any circumstance. I actually found this mostly with like if I was in a position where like someone ever like made fun of me in some way, or like was trying to say like, for example, like fucking those shoes you're wearing are like really shitty, or like what's going on with this, and I'm like, yeah, like okay, like they're good for they're good for my feet, and like that's more important to me than like what it looks like, and that's like rebounded the insult, and like now you're the bigger man if you're just being
Yeah,
vulnerable, and I'm like, okay, wow, just like vulnerability is everything.
massive.
It's been coming up in like several podcasts I've listened to in the last like 2 weeks, and then like my friend posted about it recently. You just mentioned it.
And
I
it's
actually,
so key.
yeah, it is key. Like I wrote a tweet, or an X post, whatever it's called now,
True. Yeah.
um, like 3 or 4 days ago, because I was in bed, about to fall asleep, but my mind's racing like with a podcast and shit. And I was like, have all these ideas, and then I'd like wake up and I'm like, I'm gonna post this, and I wrote, vulnerability is the key to unlocking your strength, and it actually is. And everyone says be vulnerable, but if you are vulnerable and it bounces back in your face, and you're okay, bro, you can do anything.
Oh,
Like, you can literally
it's
do
so
anything.
true. But it's also like, I mean, if you're genuine, like you'll meet other genuine people as well. And it's like there is no point in like spending time with someone who's not genuine. Like
Mhm.
you just like there's no point at all. And you can so easily see like through someone who's not being genuine. And then it's just like, okay, well, there's no point in spending any of my like lifetime with you.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and
That's
vulnerable is the key to that for sure.
that's a great theme, which I didn't expect also from this conversation, to be honest. But like the whole like not wasting your life on stuff that doesn't matter
Mm,
is something that's also been coming up for me recently. I just think like, man, there's all the time. I mean, I'm glad I've realized it now, but it's like there's been so much time, so many times where I've put myself in a situation, or like I've gone somewhere, or like gone out drinking somewhere that I just like didn't really want to be going to, but you go anyway. And like all of that time added up. If I had just swapped out that time for doing something that I enjoyed to do, and if that was like the cost of that was to lose some friends, or lose some like sick night experience that people were like fucked up and enjoying, but now I'm in a position where I'm like 10 times happier, 10 times more successful in whatever I'm doing. It's like, damn, I don't want to waste like any more seconds of my life doing shit I don't want to be doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like a lot of people around you might think that there's something wrong with that, but it's because they wish they could do that,
ah,
you
so
know?
true. Yeah,
And there's
yeah.
just like so many times I've sort of run into like I'm stopping doing this, or I'm not going to do this. And then I just get this sense or this vibe of like, oh, like maybe you're changing or things are changing. And it's just like, well, yes, like things are changing. Like this is what it should be. I'm going to be continuously changing and like evolving what
Yeah.
I'm doing, because I'm not going to sit
Stay the
around
same
fucking
forever.
staying the same forever because of other people want me to, you
Yeah.
know?
But it's also
Eh,
like I think something like this is kind of like I feel like I learned this through relationships, but like people people giving you like or like advice or like you listening to what people are saying, and it's like but the outcome solely affects you. So it's like people are like, oh, come to this party. It's like,
yeah.
well, the hangover I'm about to experience tomorrow affects me, not you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then you have to live with that consequence. It's like this is like I know I remember like a mate was like talking about like, should I like leave my partner, like, I'm not sure if it's working or whatever. I'm just like, mate, like you're the one who needs to live with the consequence. Like if you listen to my advice, like that's going to affect you only. Like it's got nothing to
Mm.
do with me. So it's like, yeah, I just find that it's yeah.
Yeah. I think like just like what you said is like people are asking you, or people are saying like, yeah, come to this party, or people are saying something like inviting you or wanting you somewhere, not for you, they want it for them. And
Yeah.
it's just like I saw this a lot actually when I was working at Initiative. It's just like the media agency I was at, and everyone was just like going out for drinks, getting drinks, going out. And I remember when I started working there, I was like, oh, I don't really drink, like I don't do this kind of stuff. And you just see everyone like pushing for like going out for drinks and doing this, but then you see people, I don't really want to, but then they get convinced, and it's just like this whole like cycle of everyone sort of just like doing this thing that's expected because that's what we do, but like because that's what everyone, because like everyone else wants everyone else to do it because it's gonna make them feel better.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like this fucked up loop of like
Massive obligation. Just like
massive
everyone feels
obligations,
obligated. Yeah.
and then you find out that you've been spending all this time every fucking Friday with people you barely like wasting your fucking life, And imagine you
Yeah.
were spending it like, I don't know, learning to code, or like going rock climbing or doing jiu-jitsu or something like that. Now you're developing areas in your life that matter, and that's growing, and that's like what you love, and it's just like compounding, you know?
Oh, it's yeah. I don't know. Like this, I know a lot of people that live like that are very like, yeah, just feel very obligated to do things, and it's just like, yeah, no. There's pros and cons, but yeah, just seems very much like a waste. Like you don't have infinite. I mean, I typically find it's just like with people who, well, I mean, actually, I was about to say a really general statement, which is like people who have like never experienced loss or like some like super like life changing thing where all of a sudden you have to like think about like, oh shit, like how do I want to spend my time? Um, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Man, there's like a lot. But look, I think we're coming up close to like I mean, we're over an hour actually.
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
hour 12.
Flew by. That's funny because like a couple minutes ago, my headphones were like low battery. And I was like, fuck, I hope these go the mile.
No, that's cool. I also like got to get off and do some work.
Yeah.
Technically, I should be working right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this has been good. I mean, I'm sure I'll have you back on here again because
I'd
I think
love
like
to, mate.
everyone,
Part two for
everyone,
sure.
yeah, yeah. I think like
Unless this gets zero views, in which case, let's not.